King Tutankhamun's golden mask hides one of history's most astonishing secrets. His body, like those of other pharaohs, was preserved for over 3,000 years through a mysterious and sacred science. We are about to uncover the step-by-step process of Egyptian mummification, a journey that will reveal the exact methods and spiritual beliefs that defied decay. You will learn the hidden truths behind the sacred rituals and the shocking details most histories ignore. How did priests manage to remove a brain without breaking the skull? What was the magical salt that stopped decomposition completely? By the end, you will understand the incredible blend of faith and science that granted eternal life. What do you believe was the most powerful force driving this ancient quest for immortality? The shimmering gold and precious jewels adorning a pharaoh's tomb were more than just treasure. They were a spiritual toolkit for the soul's eternal journey. At the heart of mummification lay a profound and urgent belief, a worldview where death was not an end, but a perilous transition. For the ancient Egyptians, a person was composed of several spiritual elements, all of which needed the physical body as a home base. The Ka was your life force, your double, which remained in the tomb and required offerings of food and drink. The Ba was your personality, your character, often shown as a bird with a human head, which could travel the world by day but had to return to the body each night. And finally, the Ak was the transformed, effective spirit that could only exist if the Ka and Ba were successfully united after death. This entire delicate system, however, depended on one critical anchor: the preserved physical body. If the body decayed, the Ka and Ba had nowhere to return. They would be lost, and the person would face the ultimate catastrophe, a complete and final extinction known as the second death. This was the core terror that mummification sought to conquer. It was not merely a preservation technique. It was the essential, sacred act that staved off oblivion itself, a physical process driven by a spiritual imperative to secure immortality. Every ritual, every careful wrap of linen, was a desperate and hopeful prayer against the silence of the second death. This spiritual battle against decay was fought in a place of profound ritual, the Per Nefer, or the House of Beauty. Far from a morbid chamber, this was a sacred workshop, a temporary structure erected on the west bank of the Nile. Its location was deeply symbolic, positioned where the sun died each evening, a land belonging to the dead. Here, the Herushetau, the masters of the secrets, began their meticulous work. These were not mere morticians, but high priests, ritual specialists who performed each step with chants and prayers, transforming a biological process into a holy rite. They worked surrounded by the tools of their sacred trade. Bronze knives and hooks, finely crafted for the delicate task ahead, lay alongside stone embalming tables, their surfaces grooved to channel away fluids. The air would have been thick with the scent of incense and resins, meant to purify the space and mask other smells, but the most crucial materials were stockpiled in staggering quantities. Mounds of gleaming white natron salt, the magical desiccant that would draw all moisture from the flesh, stood ready. Bundles of the finest linen, hundreds of yards for a single mummy, were prepared to become the body's final, protective skin. This was the sacred factory of immortality, where faith and science met over a stone slab. The sacred work within the House of Beauty began with a profound act of cleansing. The body was first washed meticulously with water from the Nile, a ritual that was far more than just physical cleaning. This water was considered sacred, the very source of life itself, and its use symbolically returned the deceased to a state of purity, ready for rebirth. Following the water, the priests would anoint the body with palm wine. The natural acids in the wine acted as a mild disinfectant, a practical benefit, but its true purpose was spiritual. The wine's strong scent was believed to please the gods and drive away malevolent spirits that might threaten the soul's journey. This purification was the essential first chapter, preparing the canvas for the incredible transformation to come. Then came the most critical and delicate physical procedure of the entire process. Using a ritual blade of obsidian or sharpened bronze, a designated priest made one single, precise incision on the left side of the abdomen. This was the only cut ever permitted on the body's torso. a stark rule that prevented the kind of disfigurement associated with violent death or desecration. The skill required for this was extraordinary. The cut had to be just long enough to allow the embalmers to reach inside, yet it was performed with such expertise that it would be almost entirely hidden by the wrappings and amulets placed over it later. This was not butchery, it was sacred surgery. The location of this cut was deeply symbolic. The left side was traditionally associated with the West, the land of the dead, and it provided direct access to the abdominal cavity. Through this single opening, the priests would perform the next vital steps, but the act itself was so charged with taboo that it was surrounded by ritual. Ancient texts tell us that the priest who made the cut would often immediately flee the scene, pursued by other attendants who would throw stones and shout curses at him. This dramatic performance served to transfer the ritual impurity of the act away from the rest of the proceedings, cleansing the workshop of the transgression of cutting the sacred flesh. It was a powerful acknowledgement that even a necessary step on the path to immortality came at a cost. Through that single sacred incision, the priests began the careful extraction of the internal organs. Their bronze hooks and tools were used with immense skill to gently pull out the lungs, the liver, the stomach, and the intestines. These specific organs were targeted because they decayed the fastest, filled with moisture and bacteria that would rapidly destroy the body from within. Yet one vital organ was always left carefully in place, the heart. The ancient Egyptians believed the heart was the very core of a person's being, the seat of their intelligence, memory, and morality. It was the one part of the body that would be weighed in the afterlife against the feather of truth. To remove it would be to erase the person's identity for eternity, leaving them a hollow, forgotten soul. So the heart remained, a silent witness within the chest. But what happened to the organs that were removed? They were not discarded. Each one was meticulously cleaned, dehydrated with natron salt, and anointed with resins. Then, they were given their own sacred vessels for protection. They were placed inside 4 magnificent containers known as canopic jars. These were not simple pots. Each jar had a unique stopper, carved in the shape of one of the 4 sons of the god Horus. The human-headed Imseti guarded the liver. The baboon-headed Hapi protected the lungs. The jackal-headed Duamudef watched over the stomach, and the falcon-headed Kebesenuv kept the intestines safe. This was a powerful system of divine magic. Each god's son offered his specific protection, ensuring that every part of the physical self was preserved and sanctified, ready for the soul's eventual return. How could such a complex ritual, assigning different guardians to different organs, have become so perfectly standardized across centuries of Egyptian history? Of all the sacred procedures performed in the House of Beauty, the treatment of the brain stands as the most shocking to the modern mind. While the heart was revered as the center of thought and feeling, the brain was viewed as a meaningless organ, a mere lump of tissue with no spiritual purpose. Its removal was therefore a necessity, but it presented a unique physical challenge. How do you extract something from a sealed skull without shattering the very bone meant to protect the body for eternity? The solution the priests devised was both gruesomely brilliant and remarkably effective. They would take a long, slender bronze hook and carefully insert it up through the corpse's left nostril. With a precise, practiced motion, they would fracture the delicate ethmoid bone, the thin plate of bone that separates the nasal cavity from the brain case. Once this barrier was breached, the hook was inside the cranium. They would then swirl and agitate the hook, not to pull the brain out in one piece, but to literally liquefy the soft brain matter. The organ was then turned into a viscous fluid. To drain it, they would simply turn the body over, allowing the emulsified brain to drip out through the nostril passage. Sometimes, a long spoon-like tool was used to help scrape the remnants free. This was a meticulous, piece-by-piece destruction of the one organ we now know governs our entire existence. We have undeniable physical proof of this practice. Examinations of royal mummies, including some of the most famous pharaohs, reveal the telltale damage. The thin ethmoid bone is often found shattered, and in some cases, fragments of the very bronze tools used in the procedure have been discovered, still lodged inside the skulls after thousands of years. This was not a messy act of desecration, but a clean, ritualized emptying of a worthless vessel. The liquefied brain was unceremoniously discarded, its container purified and left hollow, ready for a different kind of filling. With the body ritually purified and emptied, the true alchemy of preservation could begin. The key to halting decay was not found in rare herbs or complex spells, but in a simple, crystalline salt harvested from a sun-baked desert valley. This was natron, the magical desiccant that was the cornerstone of the entire mummification process. This natural salt compound was mined from the dried lake beds of the Wadi Natron, a location northwest of the Nile Delta, whose very name means the Valley of Natron. For the Egyptians, this place was not just a quarry. It was a sacred landscape, believed to be a gift from the gods specifically for the purpose of granting eternal life. The salt itself was a perfect blend of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, and other minerals, creating a substance that was powerfully hygroscopic. In simple terms, it acted like a sponge, greedily pulling moisture from anything it touched. The priests would create a bed of this white salt on an inclined embalming table. The body was then placed upon it, but the treatment was not just external. Every cavity was also meticulously packed with small linen bags filled with natron. The abdomen, the chest, and even the skull, now empty of its brain, were all stuffed full of this drying salt. The entire body was then completely covered in a massive mound of natron, left to rest for a period of 40 days. Why 40 days? This number was deeply symbolic, representing the time the star Sirius, associated with the goddess Isis, spent hidden below the horizon. It was a period of transition and waiting in the heavens, mirrored on Earth. During this time, the natron performed its silent, chemical miracle. It systematically drew every ounce of moisture out of the skin, muscles, and tissues. It dissolved and absorbed body fats, leaving the remaining tissue dry, brittle, and incredibly lightweight. The body was not tanned, it was completely desiccated. By the end of this long wait, all that remained was a shrunken, leathery form, but one that was utterly sterile and free from the agents of decay. This was the blank slate, a perfectly preserved physical anchor, now ready for its final, magnificent transformation. While the body rested beneath its white mountain of natron, the workshop became a sanctuary of constant prayer. The 40 days of drying were not a passive waiting game. They were a period of intense spiritual activity. Priests maintained a ceaseless vigil, their chants and incantations weaving a protective shield around the vulnerable form. They believed that during this transitional state, the soul was at its most fragile, susceptible to attack by malevolent forces and demons lurking in the liminal space between worlds. To counter this, the masters of the secrets recited from sacred texts, like the Pyramid texts or the later Book of the Dead. These were not merely poems, they were powerful spells, weapons of words designed to repel evil and guide the soul. Specific utterances were aimed at protecting each part of the body, ensuring that the ears could hear the gods' judgments, the eyes could see the light of the afterlife, and the mouth could speak the declarations of innocence in the final hall of judgment. The air itself was kept thick with the smoke of frankincense and myrrh, resins whose sweet, purifying scent was thought to create an environment hostile to chaotic spirits. Access to the Per Nefer was severely restricted during this time. Only the highest-ranking priests could enter, and they had to undergo rigorous purification rites themselves, washing repeatedly and adhering to strict dietary rules to maintain their own ritual purity. They were not just technicians, they were guardians, standing watch over a physical body that was slowly becoming an eternal vessel, all while its spiritual double navigated the first treacherous steps of the afterlife. This sacred vigil ensured that when the 40 days were complete, the body was not just physically preserved, but spiritually fortified, ready for the final act of reassembly and rebirth. After 40 days beneath the sacred salt, the body emerged completely transformed. The priests would carefully brush away the natron, revealing a form that was light, brittle, and deeply shrunken, its skin pulled taut like ancient leather. This desiccated shell, however, was not the final goal. The next step was to restore a semblance of life, to make the body not just preserved, but vibrant and pleasing for its eternal existence. This was the purpose of the anointing ceremony, a ritual of profound tenderness and symbolism. Using the finest oils and unguents, the priests would gently massage the stiff, dry skin with a luxurious blend of cedar oil, precious myrrh, and fragrant cinnamon. These were not random choices. Cedar oil, with its preservative qualities, helped to further protect the tissue. Myrrh and cinnamon provided a rich, sweet aroma that was believed to be beloved by the gods, masking any lingering odors of the process. But this act went far beyond simple cosmetics or even practical preservation. Each stroke of the anointing was a ritual of rebirth. The oils represented the very fluids of life itself, symbolically rehydrating the body and restoring its suppleness, just as the Nile's floodwaters brought life back to the parched desert each year. This was a physical echo of a spiritual truth. The deceased was being reborn into the afterlife, anointed like a newborn, purified and made whole again. The skin, once hard and dry, would become softer and more pliable under this treatment, a crucial preparation for the final, most dramatic phase of the entire ritual. The anointed body, now pliable and fragrant, was ready for its final restoration. The desiccation process had left it hollow and shrunken, a shadow of its former self. To conquer this, the priests performed what we might call the Great Packing, a meticulous effort to restore the body's lifelike contours for eternity. They began with the emptied skull. The cranial cavity, now just a hollow bone sphere, was often carefully packed with hot, liquid resin. This dark, sticky tree sap was poured inside, where it would cool and harden, creating a solid internal cast. Sometimes, resin-soaked linen rolls were used instead, tamped into the space to fill the void. This was not just about shape, it was a final act of purification, sealing the skull from within. The abdominal cavity, accessed through that single sacred incision, received even more elaborate attention. It was filled with packages of clean sawdust, dried lichen, and even more natron salt, all mixed with aromatic herbs like myrrh. These bundles were not random stuffing. They were carefully placed to rebuild the stomach's gentle curve and the chest's proud line, returning the body to a familiar, vibrant form. Even the smallest details were addressed. To fill out the sunken cheeks, small packets of linen were tucked inside the mouth, and for the eyes, which had often collapsed during drying, the priests crafted delicate replacements. They might place a dried onion half into each socket, its layered structure mimicking an eyeball, or they might use pads of soft, rolled linen. The goal was a face that looked peaceful, whole, and recognizably human, a face ready to see and be seen in the world to come. This entire process was an act of profound reverence, a physical promise that the soul would return to a complete and dignified home, not a broken, shriveled shell. The body, now restored and anointed, was prepared for its most visible transformation, the sacred art of wrapping. This was not a swift or simple task, but an intricate, prayer-filled ritual that could stretch for 15 days or more. Every single wrap of linen was a deliberate act, infused with spiritual power and purpose. The priests did not work in silence. As they carefully wound the bandages around each finger, each arm, and each leg, they recited specific spells from the Book of the Dead. These incantations were not general blessings. A unique spell was spoken for the protection of the right arm, another for the left leg, each one designed to magically fortify that specific part of the body against the dangers of the underworld. The materials themselves held deep meaning. The finest, whitest linen was reserved for the inner shrouds, woven specifically for this sacred purpose and often marked with protective symbols. But surprisingly, the outer layers frequently incorporated older cloth, linens that had been used in the deceased's household during their lifetime. A piece from a favorite dress or a bed sheet was not seen as second-hand, but as a treasured relic, imbued with the personal energy and memories of the life being preserved. Imagine the profound intimacy of this act. As the priests worked, the deceased was being swaddled not just in cloth, but in the very fabric of their own lived experience, a tangible link between their mortal past and their eternal future. This painstaking process, layer after layer, prayer after prayer, was building more than a mummy. It was constructing a fortress for the soul. As the linen wrappings grew in number, the priests were not just building a protective shell. They were embedding a complete magical defense system directly into the mummy's very skin. Tucked carefully between the layers of cloth, at specific points on the body, they placed powerful amulets, small objects of stone, faience, or metal, each one a concentrated piece of divine magic. These were not mere decorations. Each amulet had a precise, non-negotiable function to perform in the afterlife, a spiritual tool the soul would need to navigate the perils ahead. One of the most crucial was the heart scarab. This amulet, carved from a dark green stone like jasper and shaped like the sacred dung beetle, was placed directly over the heart or on the upper chest. Its purpose was absolutely vital. The ancient Egyptians believed that after death, your heart would be weighed against the feather of the goddess Mot, who represented truth and cosmic order. If your heart was heavy with sin and wrongdoing, it would tip the scales, condemning you to oblivion. But the scarab amulet was inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead, a plea commanding the heart not to testify against its owner. It was a magical silencer, a charm to ensure the heart remained balanced and did not betray the soul in that final, terrifying judgment. Another universally recognized amulet was the wedjat, or the Eye of Horus. This powerful symbol, representing the eye of the falcon god that was torn out and magically restored, was the ultimate emblem of protection, healing, and wholeness. Made from blue or green faience, its distinctive markings were not just decorative. They represented fractions, parts of a whole that had been made complete again through magic. Placed on the incision made by the embalmers or over the throat, the Eye of Horus was meant to heal the wounds of the mummification process itself, to magically seal any cuts and make the body spiritually intact and invulnerable. Then there was the Jed pillar, a strange, column-like amulet that resembled a tree with several crossbars. This was the symbol of stability, the backbone of the god Osiris himself. After his murder and dismemberment, Osiris was reassembled and his backbone became the central support of his resurrected body. For the deceased, the Jed pillar amulet was often placed along the spine, its magic ensuring that the individual would stand firm and stable in the afterlife, unshaken by the chaotic forces of the underworld. It guaranteed resurrection, just as Osiris had been resurrected. Imagine the deceased, encased in hundreds of yards of linen, becoming a walking arsenal of divine power. With a silent heart scarab, a healing eye, and a stable backbone, they were equipped for the journey, their physical form now a perfect vessel, charged with magic and ready for eternity. The final layer of linen was a magnificent shroud, a single vast sheet of the finest cloth that enveloped the entire wrapped form like a sacred cocoon. This was the ultimate boundary, separating the perfected, magically charged body from the mortal world. But the transformation was not yet complete. The most iconic element of the mummy was still to be placed, the cartonnage mask. This was not a simple covering for the head, but a radiant, three-dimensional portrait that fit snugly over the wrapped head and shoulders. For royalty and the elite, these masks were masterpieces of ancient artistry. Craftsmen would layer linen strips with wet plaster, molding it over a form to create a strong, lightweight shell. This shell was then covered in a brilliant layer of gold leaf or painted with a gleaming gold pigment. Gold was not chosen for its monetary value alone. It was the flesh of the gods, a substance that was considered incorruptible and eternal, shining with the same immortal light as the sun. The face depicted on the mask was not a photograph-like recreation of the deceased. It was an idealized, youthful, and serene portrait, showing the individual at the peak of their spiritual power, reborn as a perfected being. Why this idealization? The ancient Egyptians held a profound fear that the soul, after its long and disorienting journey through the afterlife, might fail to recognize its own physical body. The mask served as an unmissable beacon, a perfect and beautiful face that the Ba spirit and the Ka life force could instantly identify as their own true home. It was a divine anchor, ensuring that all the meticulous work of preservation, all the amulets and prayers, would not be in vain because the soul had lost its way. Gazing upon the golden face of Tutankhamun's mask, we are not seeing a realistic boy king. We are witnessing a guaranteed identity, a promise of recognition whispered across 3,000 years. This golden-faced mummy, now a perfected being, was still vulnerable to the physical world. Its next layer of defense was a masterpiece of art and magic, a nest of protective containers. The first and most intimate of these was the inner coffin, a breathtakingly beautiful shell carved perfectly to the body's shape. These anthropoid coffins, shaped like a human form, were far more than simple boxes. Crafted from the finest wood or even solid silver for the wealthiest, their entire surface was a canvas of divine power. Artists painted them with brilliant colors, depicting a perfect version of the deceased, often with arms crossed over the chest in the pose of the resurrected god Osiris. But the imagery did not stop at a portrait. Every inch was covered with intricate scenes and hieroglyphic spells pulled directly from the Book of the Dead. The goddess Isis might be shown kneeling on the chest, her wings outstretched in a gesture of eternal protection. The god Anubis, the guardian of embalming, was often present, ensuring the sanctity of the body. These were not just pictures, they were active prayers in visual form, a portable chapel of divine guardians that enveloped the mummy completely. This first coffin, however, was rarely alone. It was designed to fit snugly inside a second, larger coffin. This outer coffin was often even more elaborate, perhaps also anthropoid, or sometimes a rectangular chest with a vaulted lid symbolizing the sky. It repeated the same system of protective art and spells, adding another, thicker layer of magical armor. The spells on these coffins served a very practical purpose for the soul's journey. They provided a cheat sheet for the afterlife, with the correct answers to the questions the gods would ask and the names of the terrifying demons one might meet, all written out for easy reference. Imagine the soul, navigating the dark and confusing underworld, able to glance at its own coffin walls for guidance and protection. But even this double-shelled protection was not considered sufficient for a pharaoh. These nested coffins were then placed inside the final, monumental fortress, the sarcophagus. This was a massive box, usually carved from a single, incredibly heavy block of stone like granite or quartzite. The stone itself was chosen for its durability and its symbolic weight, a literal mountain of protection that no common thief or evil spirit could easily penetrate. The lid of the royal sarcophagus was a tremendous slab, often weighing several tons, requiring a team of workers to maneuver it into place. With the final, thunderous slide of this stone lid, the nest was sealed. The mummy, now hidden deep within its layers of wood, paint, and stone, was at last secure, a seed of life protected within the most formidable shells the ancient world could devise. Why did they go to such extraordinary lengths, creating these Russian dolls of divine security? Yet even a soul housed in a golden fortress remained dormant, a statue waiting for the spark of life. The final and most critical ritual was the opening of the mouth ceremony, a magical reanimation performed just before the mummy was sealed within its tomb. This was the moment the preserved body was transformed from a silent, inert vessel into a living, breathing entity for the afterlife. A specially chosen priest, often wearing a mask of the jackal god Anubis, would approach the upright mummy or its sarcophagus. In his hands he held a sacred adze, a ceremonial tool shaped like a carpenter's chisel, often forged from meteoric iron. The priest would gently touch this sacred instrument to the mouth, eyes, ears, and nose of the golden mask. Each touch was accompanied by specific, powerful spells, chanted with absolute precision. This was not a physical unlocking, but a spiritual one. The priest was not carving openings in the mask. He was using the adze as a divine key to magically restore the senses that death had stolen. With the touch to the lips, the deceased regained the ability to speak the necessary declarations before the gods, and to consume the spiritual essence of the food offerings left for them. The touch to the eyes granted them sight to behold the radiant light of the afterlife. The touch to the ears allowed them to hear the judgments of the gods, and the touch to the nose restored the breath of life, not as a biological function, but as an eternal spiritual force. Imagine the profound shift in that darkened tomb chamber. One moment, the mummy was a masterpiece of art and preservation. The next, through this sacred theater, it became a living god, a sentient being ready to take its place among the divine. This single ritual was the culmination of the entire 70-day process, the final switch that turned a perfectly preserved body into an active, eternal citizen of the next world. But this golden promise of eternity came at a price beyond the reach of most. For the millions of farmers, artisans, and laborers who built the pyramids and filled the cities, the 70-day ritual of the House of Beauty was an impossible dream. Their journey to the afterlife followed a much simpler, starker path, a reality starkly different from the pharaoh's gilded resurrection. Without the resources for master priests and sacred tools, commoners relied on affordable, often harsh, methods of preservation. One of the most common techniques involved a simple but brutal chemical process. A corrosive liquid, often a type of juniper oil or a solution made from date palm wine, was injected directly into the abdomen through a syringe-like instrument. This caustic fluid did not require any careful incisions or organ removal. Instead, it worked by dissolving the internal organs from the inside out. The body was then laid in a shallow pit filled with natron salt, where the powerful desiccant would draw out the moisture, leaving behind a preserved, if chemically burned, form. In the cheapest method of all, the body was simply placed directly into a bed of natron, completely untouched by any embalmer's tools. The organs were left to decay within the body cavity, with the natron slowly drying everything it touched. The result was a mummy, yes, but one that was often misshapen, fragile, and bore little resemblance to the lifelike perfection of the elite. We know this not from grand tomb paintings, but from the graves themselves. Archaeologists excavating common cemeteries find these mummies wrapped in coarse, reused linen, sometimes just a single sheet. They are found in simple pits in the hot sand, often without even a wooden coffin, their bodies contorted by the natural drying process. The contrast could not be more profound. One path offered a magical, guided rebirth into a divine existence. The other was a desperate, physical gamble against total annihilation, a quiet hope that the desert itself would be preservation enough. This reverence for animals extended far beyond the royal tombs and into the homes of everyday Egyptians. The mummification of creatures was an industry of staggering proportions, a testament to a faith so personal it sought divine connection through the animal kingdom. Across Egypt, millions upon millions of animals were carefully preserved, not for their own journey to the afterlife, but to serve as eternal messengers to the gods. A cat represented the goddess Bastet, the protector of the home. An ibis bird was the embodiment of Thoth, the god of wisdom. A hawk was a living symbol of Horus, the sky god. Even the fearsome crocodile was seen as a form of Sobek, the powerful deity of the Nile's fertility and its dangerous might. To offer a mummified animal to a god was to send a direct, perpetual prayer. If you wanted a favor from Thoth, you would purchase a mummified ibis from a temple workshop and dedicate it in his name, a physical plea that would remain in his presence forever. The methods used to prepare these sacred offerings varied dramatically, reflecting both the animal's size and the donor's wealth. For a wealthy devotee offering a cat to Bastet, the process could mirror the care given to a human. The internal organs might be carefully removed through a small incision, the body cavity packed with natron or sand, and the body then expertly posed before being wrapped in intricate, geometric patterns of linen. But for the vast majority, the process was far more utilitarian. Many smaller animals, like shrew mice or scarab beetles, were simply dried, coated in resin, and wrapped whole in a single bundle. Some ibis mummies were not even complete birds, but carefully arranged bundles of feathers, considered just as potent a symbol. This was faith on a budget, where the intention behind the offering mattered as much as the offering itself. The sheer volume of this practice is almost impossible to comprehend. Modern excavations have revealed vast underground labyrinths, animal catacombs that stretch for miles. One such network, dedicated to the ibis at Saqqara, is estimated to contain nearly 4 million mummified birds. Another, for the sacred bulls of the god Apis, contains massive stone sarcophagi, each one holding a single, giant bull mummy. These were not quiet cemeteries, but bustling, industrial-scale operations. Temple priests managed breeding farms for millions of animals, and workshops existed solely for their preservation and wrapping. Walking through one of these catacombs would have been an overwhelming experience, the air thick with the scent of bitumen and decay, the walls lined from floor to ceiling with millions of linen-wrapped bundles, each one a silent, enduring hope for divine intervention. How did a civilization sustain such an immense and continuous act of devotion for centuries? The golden masks and linen wrappings were only the final layer of a defense system built from remarkable chemistry. Beneath the sacred bandages, the body was sealed within a protective shell of organic resins and waxes, substances whose power we are only now beginning to fully understand through modern science. These were not chosen at random. Each material served a precise function in the eternal war against decay. Coniferous resins, tapped from trees like pine and cedar, were prized for their potent antibacterial and antifungal properties. When heated into a thick, sticky liquid and brushed onto the skin or poured into body cavities, this resin created a formidable barrier. It was nature's own plastic wrap, sealing the desiccated tissues away from moisture and the microbes that thrive in it. The most sophisticated analyses of mummy residues have identified specific tree resins, including those from the pistacia tree and true cedar, substances known for their high levels of aromatic compounds that are toxic to bacteria. They were effectively using natural antibiotics millennia before the concept was formally understood. Mixed with these resins was another crucial ingredient, beeswax. This substance provided a different kind of protection. Its hydrophobic nature meant it repelled water completely, creating a waterproof seal over the skin that locked out environmental humidity. But beeswax also had a symbolic dimension, connected to the sacred scarab beetle that pushed the sun across the sky, another layer of magical reinforcement for the rebirth journey. Modern gas chromatography and mass spectrometry have allowed scientists to dissect the chemical fingerprints left on mummy wrappings and within body cavities thousands of years later. These tests confirm a stunningly sophisticated recipe. The embalmers were not just applying sticky globs of tree sap, they were creating complex blends, mixing pistacia resin with cedar tar and animal fats to achieve the perfect consistency, penetration, and protective quality. This reveals a practical, experimental science operating hand in hand with sacred ritual. They knew through observation and tradition which substances worked best, creating a chemical legacy so effective that it preserved flesh and bone for millennia. How many other ancient secrets are still locked within the molecular memory of these preserved forms, waiting for our technology to ask the right questions? This sacred science of preservation was not born in a single moment of genius. It evolved over millennia, a slow transformation from a simple gift of the desert into a complex, state-sponsored industry. Long before the first pyramid cast its shadow, in the pre-dynastic period, the earliest Egyptians discovered immortality by accident. They buried their dead directly in the hot, dry sand. This was not a ritual, but a necessity. The desert acted as a perfect, natural desiccant, drawing all moisture from the body far more effectively than the later artificial methods ever could. The result was a spontaneous mummy, its skin and hair perfectly preserved, its form contorted but eerily lifelike. These were not the leathery figures we associate with mummies today, but pliable, naturalistic remains, tanned by the sand and sun. These early burials reveal a people who already cared for their dead, often placing them in a fetal position, curled as if for rebirth, accompanied by simple pots of food and drink for the journey ahead. The desert itself was the first and perhaps most effective embalmer, but this perfect preservation came with a terrible vulnerability. A single rainstorm, a shift in the sand, or the curiosity of a scavenger could destroy the body in an instant, obliterating the soul's only home. The drive to protect this fragile anchor would spark a revolution in burial customs, leading to the first clumsy attempt to control the process of eternity. The first step toward the classic mummy was, ironically, a step that ruined this perfect natural preservation. As society grew more complex and the elite sought grander ways to display their power, they began building mud brick tombs, structures meant to protect the body from the elements and mark their status for eternity. But by placing the body inside a sealed chamber, they removed it from the very element that had been preserving it so perfectly, the dry desert sand. Inside these tombs, shielded from the desiccating heat, the bodies were exposed to humidity and bacteria. They decayed rapidly, leaving behind only a skeleton in a beautifully decorated tomb, a spiritual catastrophe. The solution was a frantic, experimental period. They tried wrapping the body in layers of linen soaked in resin, creating a hard, shell-like cocoon. They attempted to model the facial features in plaster directly onto the skull, but these were external fixes that did not address the internal rot. The real breakthrough came when they realized they had to replicate the desert's work from the inside out. This led to the deliberate removal of the internal organs and the development of natron as the primary drying agent. By the time of the New Kingdom, the Golden Age of the Pharaohs, the process had been perfected into the 70-day ritual we have been exploring. It was no longer a desperate reaction to decay, but a proactive, confident science, a guaranteed passport to the afterlife underwritten by the full might of the state's religious and economic power. This peak of artistic and chemical mastery, however, could not last forever. As Egypt's political power waned and foreign influences grew, the sacred art of mummification began a long, slow decline. By the time of the Roman occupation, the process had become a rushed, commercialized affair. The meticulous organ removal and 40-day natron treatment were often shortened or skipped entirely. Embalmers relied more and more on the theatrical application of vast quantities of black, sticky resin, pouring it over the body to create a shiny, impressive shell that hid a poorly preserved interior. They became masters of illusion, focusing on the external appearance of the mummy rather than the internal reality of preservation. We know this from modern CT scans of mummies from this late period. They frequently reveal that the brains were left inside the skulls, and the organs were often simply shoved back into the body cavity in a disordered heap. The beautiful, protective amulets were still placed in the wrappings, but they were now often mass-produced from cheap faience, their spells sometimes copied incorrectly by scribes who no longer fully understood their sacred meaning. The focus had shifted from ensuring a functional vessel for the soul to creating a convincing product for a grieving family. The deep, unifying religious beliefs that had driven the practice for 2,000 years were fragmenting, replaced by a more commercial, and ultimately less effective, industry. The quest for eternity became a transaction. The silent faces of these mummies are no longer silent. Modern technology has given them a voice, and their stories are rewriting chapters of history. Take the great pharaoh Ramesses II. For centuries, he was known only through the colossal statues he left behind, a figure of untouchable power. But when his mummy was examined with CT scanning, a far more human picture emerged. The scans revealed an old man, likely in his 90s, suffering from severe arthritis that had curved his spine and hardened his arteries. He had dental abscesses that would have caused constant pain, and most strikingly, he had fine, well-preserved red hair, a trait often associated with the god Set, adding a new layer to his divine identity. His excellent preservation also confirmed the pinnacle of New Kingdom mummification skill. His body was meticulously eviscerated and packed, his brain removed with the classic nasal technique, and his skin treated with the finest resins. Ramesses was not just a stone god, but a mortal man who lived a very long and undoubtedly painful life, his body a testament to both human frailty and the embalmer's art. Then there is the haunting figure known as the Screaming Mummy. This mummy, discovered in a royal cache, is shockingly different from the serene, composed kings surrounding it. Its face is frozen in a grotesque grimace, mouth wide open as if captured in a final, silent scream. The body was simply dumped in a plain, unmarked coffin and wrapped in sheepskin, a material the ancient Egyptians considered ritually unclean. For over a century, this individual was a macabre mystery. Who was this person, and why were they treated with such contempt? Modern DNA testing and forensic analysis have provided a compelling and tragic answer. The evidence strongly suggests this is Prince Pentewer, a son of Pharaoh Ramesses III, who was implicated in a harem conspiracy to murder his father and seize the throne. According to ancient court documents, those found guilty in the plot were allowed to take their own life. It seems Pentewer was forced to commit suicide, possibly by poisoning, and as a punishment that would echo for eternity, his body was deliberately mummified in a way that denied him an afterlife. The grimace was likely caused by the convulsions of the poison, and the rushed, disgraceful treatment was meant to ensure his soul would never find peace. This mummy is not just a body. It is a frozen moment of royal betrayal and divine punishment. The search for the female pharaoh Hatshepsut tells a different kind of detective story. After her death, her stepson Thutmose III systematically attempted to erase her from history, smashing her statues and chiseling her name from monuments. For centuries, her final resting place was a mystery, her mummy thought to be lost. Then, in 2007, Egyptologists turned their attention to a previously overlooked mummy found in a minor tomb. It was an obese woman, middle-aged, lying in a pose reserved for royalty. A scan revealed a missing molar, and in a box inscribed with Hatshepsut's name, originally found in her tomb, was a single tooth. The tooth was a perfect fit for the gap in the mummy's jaw. This was Hatshepsut, identified not by golden treasure, but by a piece of dental evidence. Further analysis showed she was diabetic, obese, and likely died from bone cancer that had spread throughout her body. She was also in her 50s, a considerable age for the time. Her mummification was of the highest quality, proving that despite the later attempts to vilify her, she was buried with all the honors of her rightful pharaoh. These individuals, from the powerful Rameses to the disgraced prince and the rediscovered queen, show us that the secrets of mummification are not just about preserving bodies, but about preserving truth. These sacred rituals were not just described in texts, they left behind a physical trail of evidence. Scattered near the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, archaeologists have made startling discoveries, hidden caches that served as the ritual dumpsters for the House of Beauty. These embalming caches contain the actual leftovers from the mummification process, the used tools and materials considered too imbued with sacred power to be thrown away with common trash. One of the most famous, discovered near Tutankhamun's tomb, held a breathtaking collection of practical and spiritual debris. There were pottery bowls, still caked with the residues of the sacred oils and resins used to anoint the king's skin. Lumps of natron salt, discolored from their work, lay next to linen bags that once held the salt packs placed inside the body. There were even the leftover scraps of the finest linen wrappings, the cuttings from the masterful tailoring of Tutankhamun's eternal garment. These are not pristine artifacts displayed in a museum case. They are the soiled, used-up remnants of a job completed, giving us an intimate, almost voyeuristic look into the most private moments of a pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. Perhaps the most grounding finds are the embalming tables themselves. These were not delicate pieces of furniture, but massive, functional slabs of stone, often alabaster or limestone, discovered within temple complexes and royal workshops. Their surfaces are not smooth and pristine. They are heavily worn, stained from decades of use, and most tellingly, they are carved with shallow channels and basins. These grooves were not for decoration. They were practical gutters designed to channel the bodily fluids and runoff from the washing and purification stages away from the body and into collection bowls. To stand before one of these tables is to stand before the very stage where immortality was manufactured. You can almost see the high priests working around it, their chants echoing as they performed the sacred surgery, the fluids of mortality flowing along those carved paths and into ritual bowls, separating the corruptible from the eternal. Then there is the pottery, the humble clay jars that speak volumes. Beyond the glorious canopic jars, archaeologists find simpler, undecorated bowls and jars in these caches. Some were used to mix the anointing oils and resins. Others, found with organ tissue still inside, reveal a more startling truth. They were the temporary containers for the internal organs during the 40 days of drying, before the organs were finally placed into their protective canopic jars. These bowls are the unsung heroes of the process, the workaday vessels that handled the most delicate parts of the operation. In one incredible discovery, a cache associated with a mother of a pharaoh contained jars whose contents were so well preserved that scientists could identify the specific type of incense used, a high-quality frankincense, confirming the luxury of the materials described in texts. Each broken potsherd, each stained bowl, is a silent witness to a procedure that was both profoundly spiritual and intensely, physically practical. These material remains confirm the ancient texts with tangible proof, turning the legend of mummification from a story into a documented, scientific reality. This invisible knife of modern science has peeled back the linen wrappings without ever touching them. The CT scanner has become the single most important tool for Egyptology in the 21st century, a device that allows us to perform a perfect digital autopsy. By passing a mummy through the machine, scientists collect thousands of cross-sectional X-ray images, which a computer then assembles into a precise three-dimensional model of everything hidden inside. We can now look straight through the outer coffin, the inner coffin, the layers of bandages, and the skin itself to see the skeleton and all the secrets it holds. This technology is completely non-invasive, preserving these sacred remains for future generations while unlocking a wealth of information that physical unwrapping would have destroyed. It is a respectful revolution, a way of listening to the stories these bodies have been waiting millennia to tell. One of the most immediate revelations is the person's age and gender. By analyzing the development of the teeth, the fusion of the skull sutures, and the wear on the pelvic bones, forensic experts can determine an individual's age at death with remarkable accuracy. Gender is revealed through the distinct shapes of the hip bones and the skull. This simple data has corrected centuries of mistaken identities. For example, a mummy long believed to be a young pharaoh based on its ornate coffin was revealed by a scan to be an elderly woman, completely rewriting the historical narrative associated with that burial. The scans also provide a detailed medical chart from the ancient world. We can see the evidence of chronic diseases written in the bones. Severe arthritis appears as polished, worn joints and bony spurs along the spine. Dental abscesses show up as dark voids at the root of a tooth, surrounded by a halo of infection in the jawbone. We have found cases of advanced atherosclerosis, the hardening of the arteries, with calcified plaques still visible in the preserved vessels of mummies who lived on rich, fatty diets. These are not just abstract diagnoses. They are intimate glimpses into a person's daily life and suffering, proving that the pharaohs and their people endured the same aches and ailments that we do today. Perhaps the most thrilling discoveries are the hidden treasures that remain exactly where the priests placed them. CT scans can distinguish between different materials based on their density. The dark, airy void of a linen bundle contrasts sharply with the brilliant white signature of metal or the granular texture of stone. This allows researchers to digitally locate amulets still nestled between the wrapping layers, exactly as described in the Book of the Dead. Golden tongue plates placed to ensure the deceased could speak in the afterlife are revealed, shining brightly inside the mouth cavity. Elaborate beaded nets, completely invisible from the outside, are found draped over the torso. In one stunning case, scans of a priest's mummy showed an entire ritual artifact, a ceremonial staff, carefully concealed within the wrappings along his side. These are the undisturbed arrangements of sacred magic, giving us an unprecedented view of the final, perfected state of the mummy as it was laid to rest. What other secrets are we just one scan away from uncovering? The silver screen has wrapped the mummy in a shroud of pure fantasy, creating a monster from what was a sacred vessel. These reanimated, linen-clad creatures seeking vengeance are a complete fiction, a horror story invented centuries after the last pyramid was built. The ancient Egyptians feared the second death, the soul's extinction, above all else. The entire goal of mummification was to achieve a peaceful, eternal existence, not a restless, walking one. A mummy was designed to be a peaceful resident of the afterlife, not a terror of the living world. The real curse was not a magical threat inscribed on a tomb wall, but the spiritual consequence of disturbing a soul's eternal home. Another pervasive myth paints the embalmers as shackled slaves, toiling under the lash. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Herushetau, the masters of the secrets, were high-ranking, revered priests. Their work was considered a holy vocation, a direct service to the gods that required immense ritual purity and specialized knowledge passed down through generations. They were the elite scientists and theologians of their day, performing a sacred duty that was believed to uphold the cosmic order itself. Their skills were so valued that their workshops and recipes became a state-sponsored industry. Even the most dramatic physical procedure, the removal of the brain through the nose, was not a universal constant. While it was the standard, refined method during the New Kingdom Golden Age, Earlier and later periods show significant variation. In some early mummies, the brain was simply left to decay inside the skull. In others from the late period, embalmers sometimes made a larger hole in the base of the skull, or even through the eye socket to extract the brain, abandoning the delicate nasal technique altogether. The Hollywood image of a single, gruesome hook is an oversimplification of a practice that evolved over 2,000 years. These myths obscure the true wonder of the process. The real magic was not in a curse, but in the chemistry of natron. The real horror was not a walking corpse, but the spiritual terror of decay and oblivion. The real drama was not in a monster's revenge, but in a priest's meticulous, prayer-filled act of creation. By stripping away the cinematic fiction, we can finally see the mummy for what it truly was, a profound and hopeful monument to the human desire for life beyond death. That sacred quest for eternity did not end at the sealed tomb door. The Egyptian obsession with preservation ignited a global fascination that would ripple through centuries, transforming from a spiritual practice into a spectacle that helped birth modern science. The Victorian era witnessed one of the most bizarre and morbid chapters in this story, the phenomenon of mummy unwrapping parties. In the drawing rooms of wealthy Europeans and Americans, an unwrapped mummy was the ultimate entertainment. An Egyptologist, or sometimes just a curious host, would acquire a mummy and invite guests to witness its unveiling. They would peel back the sacred linen layers like a gruesome present, while attendees oohed and awed, sometimes even pocketing a piece of amulet or bone as a macabre souvenir. The mummy itself was often ground into a powder and sold as a medicinal cure-all, a tragic end for a body preserved for millennia. This was not seen as desecration at the time, but as a scientific curiosity, a tangible piece of an exotic past. Yet from this strange and disrespectful practice, a genuine scientific interest began to grow. Physicians started to attend these unwrappings, not for the spectacle, but to examine the ancient anatomy. They were astonished to find hardened arteries, evidence of arthritis, and worn teeth, proving that these ancient people suffered from the same afflictions as modern humans. This was the very beginning of paleopathology, the study of ancient disease, and it was mummies that provided the first concrete evidence that illness had a deep and long history. The study of these preserved tissues has since unlocked secrets about the evolution of tuberculosis, the presence of malaria in the ancient world, and even the diet of the pharaohs. This forensic analysis extends far beyond disease. By studying the isotopes in mummy hair and bones, scientists can now trace an individual's geographical origins and track their movements during their lifetime. They can identify the specific resins and oils used in embalming, revealing ancient trade routes that stretched across the Mediterranean and into Central Africa. The meticulous methods of the ancient embalmers have even informed modern forensic science. The understanding of how bodies decompose in different environments and how to arrest that process has roots in the ancient, empirical knowledge of natron and resin. How many of our modern medical and scientific advances owe a quiet, unacknowledged debt to the sacred rituals of the Harushetau? The legacy of the mummy is not locked in a museum case, but is woven into the very fabric of how we understand the human story, from our shared vulnerabilities to our enduring quest for knowledge. From a body fresh with life to a golden vessel for eternity, the mummification process was a 70-day symphony of faith and science. It began with a sacred purification, washing the body in the waters of the Nile, and moved to the precise, ritualized surgery that prepared the physical form for its eternal role. The priests battled decay with the desert's own salt, natron, patiently drawing out every drop of moisture over 40 long days. They then restored the shrunken form with linen and resin, anointing it with oils that symbolized the breath of new life. Every wrap of bandage was a prayer, every amulet a piece of divine armor, and every golden mask a beacon for the returning soul. This was not a single act, but a chain of interlocking rituals, each one essential, blending profound spiritual belief with meticulous chemical science and breathtaking artistry. The entire civilization invested its greatest resources and its deepest hopes into this sacred process, all to conquer humanity's oldest fear, the silence of oblivion. In the end, the mummy stands as a testament to a timeless quest, a physical argument against the finality of death. What part of this ancient secret resonated most deeply with you? Was it the spiritual terror of the second death that drove them, the brilliant chemistry of natron, or the intimate magic of the protective amulets? Share which secret of the mummification process captured your imagination in the comments below.